Hey there, folks. Welcome back for another exciting video. Did you miss us?
I missed us.
I really missed us. Patrick, what are we talking about?
So, we've been doing a bunch of tours with some buyers recently and looking at some older construction. So thought top 5 things that we should be looking for when we take a look at an older home.
Yeah.
Before we do that,
as always, if you like real estate,
I do.
you live in the Pacific Northwest,
I sure do.
and maybe you just want to know how to make sure you're not buying a total piece of crap house.
I do.
Well, be sure to click that subscribe button down below for more great content just like this. So yeah, just a little bit of background on Portland real estate in general. We have homes generally dating back to about the early 1900s, late 1800s. A lot of craftsmen's, four squares, bungalows, gorgeous, gorgeous homes. But oftentimes these properties have a lot of deferred maintenance, older systems. And so, today we just wanted to cover what are the top 5 items that we really try to prioritize when we're looking at a home with a potential buyer and making sure that they're making a well-informed decision, because these are usually the big, expensive price tag things that can kill a deal or turn off a buyer from the property.
Let's go.
Modern day wiring, which is Romex, which is a coated wiring, is kind of the standard. The big challenge that we run into with knob and tube wiring is that it tends to heat up pretty quick. I would say that at a baseline, knob and tube is only really dangerous when it's covered by something. So insulation is one of the examples of that. And why it's an issue in those cases is you have heat, and then you have something that's combustible, you create a fire. And then fire in house makes a bad outcome as well.
Fire! Oh, fire! Oh my goodness! What's the procedure?
I would say you look at an older home in Portland, 60 to 70% of these homes, unless they've been recently updated, are likely going to have knob and tube in some part of the house. You kind of have to take into consideration how often you're seeing fires as a result of knob and tube wiring coming up. It doesn't really come up that often. It is a major health and safety risk.
Sure.
So generally speaking, you're going to want to address it in areas where there's insulation.
There are ways to remediate that doesn't require you to completely rip it out.
Yep. I mean, in areas where it's exposed, like in the attic, it's easy to remove it and replace it. The only way that you're really going to be able to fully remove knob and tube, though, is opening up all the walls, locating all the wires, and then rewiring the entire house, which can be really pricey. So the quick and dirty option is just remove the attic knob and tube and leave everything else as is. So, yeah. Number 2, interestingly, outdated plumbing. Why is outdated plumbing a concern?
That's a really good question.
Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, when you're in a home that is an older home, you're going to find galvanized steel plumbing versus updated copper or PEX piping, which is the plastic version of that. Copper as well as PEX have the ability to expand and constrict with weather changes, and since we live in a climate where it gets cold and it's hot, you want to be able to have a pipe that can move with that, otherwise you end up with pipe bursts. The other major consideration there is that, with an older home, you generally start to see the old galvanized steel pipes starting to fail at a much faster rate as you get towards, where we're at right now in the 2020s. You never know when a pipe is going to fully fail on it. The only way to update these pipes, again, is to open up the walls in areas where there's plumbing and replace the piping. When you're doing that, you might as well update your knob and tube, right? The other consideration in there is your sewer line. So we generally are going to see galvanized steel sewer lines. In some occasions, you'll see terracotta sewer lines. Sometimes these lines are done on a party line where one line is attached to another house. Those have to be addressed, and usually some neighbor agreement where one person takes the line, the other person's cut off, they have to get a new line. So there's a few options for addressing that. You're always going to want to get a sewer scope whenever you purchase a home, even new construction, just to be putting that out there. But when you have a failed line, it either means you're going to have to spot repair the line, which means they dig it up, they trench it, and then they repair that section. If the line is totally failed, they'll have to replace the entire thing. In some cases, though, there's an option called CIPP Pisces. CIPP piping is cured in place piping, which essentially is a pipe that gets blown up inside of a sewer line. It's going to adhere to whatever shape is in there. So if the pipe is still fully connected, there's no big cracks in the line or anything, then you can ostensibly blow up a line inside of it. It will be slightly smaller, but it is a great way to go about repairing your line that doesn't involve excavating and a ton of new materials.
You're black.
Both of these things are things that will come up during inspections as long as you make sure you're getting the general home inspection as well as that sewer scope.
And it's always ultimately up to you how you want to address it. If you want to move forward, great, we can negotiate these things. If not, move on.org.
Roofsies. So with older homes, one of the things that we want to watch for with a roof is first try to determine the approximate age of the roof and is it within the general lifespan of that roof.
What's the general lifespan of a roof? Would you say like a standard roof?
I'd say 15 to 20 years. What would you say?
I would also say 15 to 20 years.
Oh, look at that. We're in agreement. The underlayment and sheathing of the roof components, we might see some water intrusion. As you might guess, in the Northwest, we do get a fair bit of wet weather. Fair bit of wet weather that could lead to some rotting in those beams as well as microbial growth.
What generally causes moisture permeation in a roof?
As a roof approaches its end of life, we'll see some breakdown in the materials that can lead to areas for water to be able to sort of easily penetrate the upper areas of your home.
Yeah. You have an older home that may not have been as well attended as it should have been. And it's possible this roof has been used for well past its lifespan, in which case, it's a lot more common to see water permeate, get into the sheeting, get into, the attic, and impact things like the structural components as well as the sheeting itself, which is where the cost really comes from. The sheeting isn't as expensive. It's expensive, but it's like a $9,000 replacement versus like a $20,000 to $30,000 replacement, depending on the size of the roof and work needed.
Yeah.
What's microbial growth?
Well, that's where you want a professional to come in who can assess.
Come in where? Where are they coming in?
They're coming into the home. They'll check out the attic and crawl space, the upper crawl spaces, just to see if we do have water intrusion. That can sometimes lead to microbial growth or mold.
Mold is definitely scary to hear about. The important thing to remember is that we live in the Pacific Northwest and moisture is literally everywhere. And even if you are the most diligent homeowner living in a new construction home, it's still entirely possible you're getting mold up there. It's fairly easy to treat. Don't paint over mold. There's some sealant products that are out there that is a no, don't do that. What happens is you actually seal the mold. Once you've done that, the mold is trapped between painted on surface and the wood itself. And so it's just going to continue to grow and there's no way to remove it other than removing the wood itself. So there's treatment services that are out there. We have plenty of contractors we can coordinate for that. Foundation. The foundation of every home is a good foundation.
Oh, that kind of foundation. Got it. Yep.
There are homes that are on slab, which means that there's no crawl space. And then there's homes that are on foundations. So one of the big, concerns that comes up with an older foundation is, the materials that are used. Sometimes the concrete that was used to pour the foundation may have come from an entirely different environment than the concrete that we pour now. So there was like a period where they were taking it from one quarry where the sand was a lot more granular and those foundations started to dissolve over time. What would you say is like a big concern around cracking foundations?
Sort of depending on the size and shape and direction of the crack in the foundation, it could lead to further settling or completely, taking the home off of its foundation or off of a sort of center point.
You know, depending on the size of the crack, some cracks which are more superficial or smaller, you may just want to monitor it, and sometimes that means just taking preventative measures like directing water away from the foundation, which can be done with like a French drain system or with, you know, having a redirector with the gutter. You'll be able to assess it based off of, you know, like Patrik said, licensed, you know, geotech or a foundation expert.
With foundations, we'll look at any bowing, any cracking, and depending on the severity, we can work with a professional to help you assess if we need to do some work to make it livable and safe.
Because your safety is number one.
So when we say an underground storage tank, what might that mean?
I don't know that it's necessarily specifically in the Pacific Northwest, but just in general, when people were heating their homes, they'd have these underground storage tanks built with heating oil in them that they would bury in the ground in these concrete canisters. Generally speaking, they weren't removed or, you know, decommissioned, and so the biggest concern that can come up here is that these tanks, the concrete will start to degrade and you potentially get toxic oil in the ground and pose a health hazard in general. The DEQ also requires that these tanks be decommissioned. So Patrik, how do we even find these tanks?
We'll, as part of some of the inspections that we highly recommend, one of them is an underground tank locate.
It's like a big metal detector.
It's like,
They walk around with it and try to find big metal objects in the ground.
yeah, could be treasure, or it could be a tank.
Yeah. The other great option is to just check out the DEQ website, because usually if a tank has been decommissioned, it's going to be listed on that site. How are these tanks generally addressed? Do they remove them and take them out of the ground, or you know, what do they do with the soil if it's toxic?
They will do an assessment to see if there are any cracks or leaks in the tank if it hasn't been decommissioned. And then if it appears that there were some cracks, then they'll do a soil test to assess if there has been leaching into the soil. But generally, you know, if the tank is okay, they'll fill it with some sand or particulate and seal it up, and you are good to go.
You know, these tanks themselves, they don't want to necessarily remove them because it can be really costly. It goes into a landfill, and so, you know, fill it with sand and bury it again, just ensuring that it, you know, stays underground and doesn't rise up on you, or you have some sort of I guess, you know, probably not rising up so much as just creating a sinkhole. You don't want sinkholes in your backyard. No. That's it.
That's it.
There's
no more.
There's no more. You get
Top
5.
you'd only get 5.
I mean, there's like a litany of other things that, you know, we could delve into, but we're not going to.
Those are the top 5.
That's the top 5. And we could rabbit hole on those topics forever, I feel like. But that's kind of the high level of it. If you live in an older home, though, or if you have questions about, you know, buying an older home, we're big fans of Craftsman, big fans of Foursquares. Obviously, at the end of the day, we are not experts, and that's something we have to emphasize on these particular issues. But we do have a broad variety of resources available to help you with these things.
I don't think that the age of a home should deter you from buying them. I mean, I kind of like older homes with the character. And so these are just some considerations. It doesn't mean that every older home that you look at is going to have any or all of these issues. Just some things to have in the back of your mind as you do your walkthrough with your trusted real estate professionals.
Well, we want to hear from you. What are some of the things you want to hear about in the buying and selling process? Comment down below. As always, if you liked what you saw here today, feel free to click that subscribe button down below for more great content just like this. That's going to do it for us.
Bye.
Bye.